So I'm delighted now for you to hear from Chris Mills from Strategic Grants. Strategic Grants are members of the vetted Benefolk Expert Network, and you'll know them. They've been around for nearly 20 years and really contributed significantly to our thriving sector here in Australia. And Chris has 15 years experience in the for-purpose sector, beginning his career as a social worker before moving into fundraising in 2017. And Chris has had fundraising roles at Brotherhood of St. Lawrence and Launch Housing, and now in his role as grants strategist at Strategic Grants, try and say that quickly. And he supports organisations across Australia to build and maintain a successful grants program. So welcome, Chris. Just checking that you're there and your sound is on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Julia. Thanks for having us as well as Strategic Grants.
Oh, it's just been wonderful having your partnership and support for us to bring the summit to life. So thanks, Chris, for jumping in with us today. Really keen to hear what you're seeing across Strategic Grants. So the first thing I wanted to hear was, what are some of the key issues that you're seeing that are impacting income?
Thank you. So I'll stick to grants, given that that's our specialty. But in the grant space, we speak a lot to organisations, and we also run a benchmarking study. And what we're hearing is under-resourcing, high turnover of fundraising staff, a very high level of competition for available funding. So it's becoming difficult to stand out. It's always a challenge managing the balance for fundraising staff between nurturing existing relationships and applying to new funders. It's a challenge to connect project planning with available grants and align timing of projects and budget cycles with funder timelines. And then one that we hear all the time is it's a challenge to access funders who don't have open grant rounds. So that's the invitation-only funders.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very consistent with some of the pain points. We'd love to hear from you as well while we're talking with Chris in the chat box. What are you seeing as some of the main issues impacting your organisation? Chris, looking ahead, and I know you've got you see a lot in terms of what is coming down the line. What are some of the changes that you're seeing in the grant space that, organisations here with us today need to be aware of for the coming 6 to 12 months?
Thank you. The first one I'll highlight is trust-based philanthropy. So that's something we speak about quite a bit in our workshops, and something that we're seeing coming through with more and more funders, especially large ones with a good network across the community sector. So trust-based philanthropy focuses on building relationships, providing flexible funding, including core operating support, and minimising administrative burdens on charitable partners. The idea being to trust the expertise of the not-for-profit working directly with communities to direct the funding to where it's needed most. And obviously it's not easy to come up with a trust-based philanthropic partnership overnight, but one of the ways you can stand out in doing that is to really focus on your relationship building and also focus on your outcomes measurement, which I'll explore a little bit further later on as well. Another one is the Future Foundations for Giving report that was done by the Productivity Commission. There's one recommendation in there that I always highlight. I think that it has the potential to bring a lot more of a flow of income into the charitable sector in the coming years. So the Productivity Commission made a recommendation to the Australian government that they increase the minimum annual distribution rate for giving funds, so between 5 and 8%. At the moment, it's between 4 and 5. So we know that there's a lot of assets being held in giving funds, and that's quadrupled in the last 10 years. So that could have a fairly transformational impact. It's also relevant to mention what Catherine said about the intergenerational transfer of wealth. So obviously that will have a significant impact on bequests. It will also have a significant impact on giving funds for high net wealth families. And the last one I want to highlight is the Pay What It Takes initiative. So it's now under the one umbrella with funders and organisations seeking funding. Their resources are really excellent. They put a lot of work into them, the research and the resources, and familiarising yourself with them can help you guide internal conversations about funding the full cost of initiatives, as well as how you would frame those conversations with grant makers.
Beautiful. Thanks for that, Chris. We actually have a slide and some links coming up about Pay What It Takes in just a moment. Chris, I know you've got your finger on the pulse in other areas, talking with funders all the time and seeing what's happening. What are some of the other trends that you think that organisations here today should be aware of?
Thank you. The first is data-driven grant making and evaluation. So we're seeing a lot more sophistication in the way that funders are measuring impact and making choices about who they want to partner with based on the organisation's outcomes measurement framework and ability to articulate that. So with that in mind, it's a challenge for organisations to get out ahead of this, but to certainly encourage everyone to take it very seriously. And some organisations have terrific organisation-wide monitoring and evaluation frameworks either in place or coming into place. But for those who are smaller, we often use tools like the Community Impact Planner from the Western Australian Community Impact Hub or the Social Impact Toolbox from the University of Technology, Sydney. Those sorts of things can really support organisations who might be in the habit of reporting outputs as outcomes to think carefully about the inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impact, and the indicators that they will use to measure outcomes and impact for their programs. And so putting time into thinking about these things and articulating them well will help you stand out in the grant seeking market. Another one that I come across quite a lot, organisations will be reporting up to their executive leadership and board on funds raised as being the ultimate measure of success in a grants program. And obviously that is the all-important metric, but it has its limitations. An excessive focus on funds raised can wear out fundraising staff and lead to increased turnover. So we encourage people to consider a range of KPIs when measuring performance in the grants program. These sorts of KPIs include new opportunities identified, number of funders contacted, both new and existing, number of funder conversations and meetings, both new and existing, number of applications or proposals submitted, percentage success rate, satisfactory cost revenue ratio. And we've just released a benchmarking report where we surveyed organisations and they said that they're experiencing a 497% return on investment on the cost of their grants program, so basically 5 to 1. Bear in mind that obviously includes organisations with very established grants programs, but it's well worth it. The percentage of funder reports submitted on time, the percentage retention rate, so repeat gifts, feedback from funders, making sure you're noting that along the way, internal stakeholder engagement, and increased interest from funders. So noting that when funders contact you, based on something they might have seen or based on reputation, noting all of those things can really bring a lot of depth to your performance reporting at executive level and board level. That's probably enough for now, I would think, Julia.
That's great. Thank you, Chris. Those KPIs are so important. We often don't see organisations necessarily having the breadth of those KPIs. And if that's something that you're interested in here, looking at a bit more, the benchmark report that we're sharing next from Strategic Grants has some of those KPIs, and it's worth following up and talking with Strategic Grants about them. Thanks, Chris. We've got a session, as you saw, coming up this week with Brangan, who works closely with your team as well, on how organisations can increase their grant success rate. I'd love to hear your top tips, given you've been at this for many, many years. What would be your advice in this area?
Thank you. So this one I wanted to make sure we left a little bit of time for. So the one I'll start with is to know what your organisation's top funding priorities are and to build out your content library in relation to those funding priorities. So knowing what they are will guide your prospect research, understanding who your audience is and how to communicate with them. You need to make sure that those top funding priorities are aligned with the organisation's purpose and strategic plan, and they'll meet the organisation's short, medium and long-term needs. So once you've established those, it's important to make sure that you build out project plan templates for your key funding priorities. This helps test the grant readiness of them, and it also gives you a library of content that you can adapt quickly to applications and proposals based on your prospect research and initial funder engagement. And another thing that can really help is ensuring that you've got a centralised document outlining your organisation's key messages, such as vision, purpose, history, achievements. With all of those things, you'll be armed with just about everything you need to have fulsome discussions with funders in whatever capacity. So an initial letter of inquiry or email or a conversation at an event or over the phone, proposals, applications, things like that. Researching funders thoroughly is the next one that I'll highlight. So not just taking a scattergun approach to your grant seeking where you're applying for everything, but applying for those that are really aligned with your organisation's purpose and activities. Understand the specific guidelines, funding histories, timelines, and grant amounts of the funders you're applying to as well, to help guide the way that you position your ask and the amount that you're asking for. Note their language and ground your communications in the language they use. That's a crucial point, because it will help them as they're reading through whatever you've given them to understand how you're helping them achieve their objectives, as opposed to the other way around. And that's a really crucial mindset shift. And the last thing I'll highlight is to invest time in building relationships with funders. So where possible and appropriate, cultivate relationships with grant makers, reach out for a conversation before submitting an application, send emails, send letters of inquiry, attend information sessions, network at sector events, and seek opportunities to connect and share your work. Consider who in your organisation has relationships within the philanthropic sector. This is a really key point. So this might be executive leadership, might be CEO, it might be your board. Sit down with them to understand how they can support your organisation to connect with funders who align with what you do. And there are a couple of ways you can go about this. You could sit down with them and ask them to outline who they think they've got relationships with, or you can come to them with lists of funders and trustees who you would like them to review. And I've done this with organisations very successfully, and I've seen organisations, get in the door with major funders who they before had no idea that they could. So it's a really effective way to do things. And then the final point that I'll make is to nurture your existing funder relationships. So provide on-time and engaging reporting, share case studies, testimonials, or personalised notes, short video updates from key staff. Let funders know when projects they're either funding or interested in are featured in the news or hit major milestones. Invite them to events or site visits, and publicly acknowledge them in meaningful ways where appropriate. So, for example, that might be a feature in an organisational newsletter or annual report, it might be a social media post or a collaborative submission for an award. Your existing funders are really important friends to the organisation that you need to take care of, and they can also lead to further funder introductions as well.
Excellent. Great advice there, Chris. Hopefully people have got a few gems there and some reminders as well. I think the handwritten note is something that everyone loves receiving in a digital world. So thank you for sharing your tips, and thank you for being on this session with us today, Chris. I'm going to highlight some of the things that you've mentioned as well for everyone today. So in the chat box now is the benchmark report that Chris was talking to, and we've just got a couple of screenshots here of the benchmark report. You can see that there's some really great information on the screen. There's also links to further benchmark reports, and I think that's gold. Thank you, Strategic Grants team, for putting your insights into this benchmark report, but also other links, because I think sometimes organisations, especially when we're communicating with our boards, to actually have that data at our fingertips is just so useful and so essential. So thank you very much for that. The other thing that Chris mentioned, which is very exciting in Australia, is the Pay What It Takes movement. It's moved beyond a movement now. Some may remember a few years ago the research report that came out and the advocacy documentation that came out back in 2020, I think it was. And now it's really progressed quite significantly. There's some fantastic resources on the Pay What It Takes website. We're putting them in the chat box for you now. And this whole idea of reframing overheads. This is also a way of putting some money or retaining some money in your budget. If we all start to reframe overheads and use some of these tools, many funders now are also starting to talk about being pay what it takes funders. So you can actually have those conversations with your funders that you're a pay what it takes charity too. And if you jump in, have a look at the Fundraiser's Guide to Impactful Partnerships, have a look at some of the spreadsheets that are in there to help cost out and reframe the way that we cost out our programs and our organizations. So a couple of wonderful resources there. And please share these with others as well. There's a lot of organizations so busy doing the do that they don't know that some of these resources actually exist. So thanks, Chris, very much for spotlighting that. And thanks, Strategic Grants, again, for the important and vital work that you do for the whole sector. So Thank you. Thanks, Chris.